Moving on to chapter 12. If Jesus was serious, then we will seek God's glory rather than our own. Now, I don't know about you, when I read these two chapters together, I kind of got a little bit of theme that Skye was going on to, and that is sort of this idea either we want to value the ordinary life or the famous one, or we're seeking God's glory and not our own. That maybe Jesus was speaking something to our ego, which maybe sometimes more often than we like to admit gets in the way. Am I the only one? Guessing not. So I'm picking up a theme. So what we're actually doing here is, again, we're just going to verse 15 and 16. And this is what it reads. So right after you are the salt, you are the light. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. Okay, obviously, light in how Jesus is presenting this is something practical. This is a place of encouragement. Because basically saying is, why would you have a light? Why would you even turn it on to immediately put it under something that blocks the light? That reduces, if not takes away, the complete usefulness of that light. Right? Why go to a lighthouse, turn the light on, and put the blinds up? There's something very, very practical and useful in this. Now, what can happen here, and Skye points this out in this chapter, is that we can see that it might mean some sort of public form of a religious expression, and how people would maybe have heard that, how we definitely can hear that. However, if you read the Sermon on the Mount, and you get through the rest of chapter 5, you start to chapter 6, we see that Jesus gets a little hard on religious leaders for being public. And it kind of comes across a little contradictory when he gets strong with these leaders. And it's specifically around the areas of giving, praying, and fasting. And he chastised them. He says, basically the idea of this should be done in private, not drawing attention to themselves. And we do find that really Jesus would have this issue with a lot of the religious leaders through different things, basically looking at these public expressions and making that just so important, and he'll be hard on them. And so it does kind of come across as a contradiction, where we have the idea is you shine that light for all to see, but do this in private. And though it might seem like a contradiction, really what you're coming down here, it's a matter of motivation, purpose, and intent. And Jesus is bringing that to the forefront. Because basically what he says is those leaders, they're doing it for the approval of the people. They want them to see how wonderful, how holy, they might use the word pious, how close they are to God. And it really isn't about God. It's about perceptions others have of them. It's about their own stature. It's about getting validation in front of the people. The only lights that's actually shining at that moment is a spotlight that they've pointed right on themselves. And Jesus actually says they are actually getting the reward they want in that point. And that reward isn't God. It might be presented in that fashion, but they're really pointing to themselves and drawing other people to what they think is the wonderfulness of themselves. Now, here's the thing. Giving, praying, fasting, these are good things, but they're really used for our personal connection and devotion with God. And the reward, God himself. So maybe the question that we need to pose is, when we do stuff, who's it really for? Is it about giving glory and credit to God? Or is it about me? Which can be a scary question to ask. I like maybe putting it in this way. I've been reading a book called The Storyteller by Dave Grohl. Foo Fighters, drummer from Nirvana, if you don't know. And he's telling a story before fame, traveling around in a van, living in a van. Just want you to know that's rock and roll. Having maybe 2 or 3 sets of clothes and just trying to figure out which one is less dirty. So before the fame, playing around, he tells a story about he's in the van and someone knocks on the van and says, "Hey, where's the drummer?" And he said, usually that's not a good thing because he's getting in trouble for something. So, of course, he says, "I'm right here," sheepishly. And he goes, "Well, Iggy Pop, a grandfather of punk rock music, frontman for the Stooges, he heard you play, he'd like you to come jam with you." Well, Dave Grohl's thinking, like, "I've listened to all your albums. I've learned to play drums by listening to your album." So he goes in there wondering what's going on, and he gets into the where the concert hall is, and Iggy Pop by himself is there, introduced, and they just, "Do you know my songs?" "Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know your songs." And they start playing his songs, and he's thinking, like, this is once in a lifetime. One of my musical heroes, and he's playing, and he starts to show him some new songs on the new album he hadn't heard of yet. And Dave Grohl would basically say this: he sang these songs with a passion of a man performing to a sold-out stadium. And as I read that really spoke to me. At that moment, there's 2 people in the room, and he's singing with passion. Like that room was filled with people who just want a piece of him, who would love just 3 seconds to acknowledge their existence, who are singing every song, word for word, but there's no one else in the room in that same passion, simply because he loves to play music and he loves the songs that he's singing. And I think when we talk about what it means to be a light and be about God's glory and not ours, is that sort of idea. When no one's looking, is it just because of the love for God? If no one notices, is it just because the love of God? With that same passion. Now, I'm not saying that if someone notices you, somehow you've made a mistake. It's just about a reminder of where the glory goes. And I think this is played out so well when Paul would write to the 1 Corinthians, and there's a disagreement between the Corinthians, and basically they're picking sides, or basically picking favorites. You know, whether it's Paul or another teacher named Apollos. Who's better? And Paul would write this: "After all, who is Apollos? Who is Paul? We are only God's servants through whom you believed the good news. Each of us did the work the Lord gave us. I planted the seed in your hearts, and Apollos watered it, but it was God who made it grow." It's not important who does the planting or who does the watering. What's important is that God makes the seed grow. And I love this because at that point, Paul's acknowledging, yeah, I did something. He's even acknowledging that Apollos did something. But basically he's just saying, but we just did what we heard God telling us to do. And if there's any benefit from that, it's because God did it. In fact, if it wasn't us, it'd just been someone else. Because what's important is God brought the growth. I think this is a good model of seeking God's glory over our own. Again, not somehow not acknowledging we didn't have a part to play in it, but just the idea of, but we just did what we heard God telling us to do, and if it wasn't me, it'd been someone else. Scott McKnight writes this: Jesus exhorts his disciples to be people of good works, in a manner that attention and glory go to God the Father. If the act is a benefit of others, and the glory of God, it should not be hidden. It needs to be a light because it needs to be seen where the glory is going.